got we had quite a few people book on, and there's quite a difference at the moment with how many people are attending. So I'm just going to give it another minute or two, and then we will get started. If we continue with quite a small group, as we are at the moment, then hopefully we can go through the tribunal training a little bit quicker. So we will see how we go. And I'm just going to share my screen with the tribunal training so that you can see it. There we go. Like I say, I'm just going to give it another minute and then we'll get started. Thank you all so much for coming today. I know it's a really beautiful day and we're in the Easter holidays, but thank you for attending today's tribunal training. I'm really hoping that you find it useful and that it gives you the information you need to move forward with your tribunal, your appeal. Okay, so I think we'll probably get started. So just a few things. Firstly, like I said before, welcome everyone. Thank you all so much for coming to today's tribunal training. This tribunal training is specifically around post-16 phase transfer, and that's because those of you that are here may have had your phase transfer in February, which is when your child or young person with an EHCP moves from one phase of education to another, and you would have received that phase transfer by the 15th of February. But we also have the post-16 phase transfer. So for those young people in year 11 that would have received the phase transfer by the 1st of March. Some of you may be here because you're going through a tribunal that is outside of that phase transfer around appealing a final EHCP, and that's fine. What we will be doing today, as explained in the advert when it was put out, is that we will be discussing appealing a final EHCP, so a final plan. My name is Neve Keane. I'm the manager of the Norfolk SENDIAS, which stands for Special Educational Needs Disability Information Advice and Support Service. We used to be known as Norfolk SEND Partnership. We're exactly the same service. It's just that we've changed names to Norfolk SENDIAS so that we are recognised nationally, because we are part of a national body, the IASSN, which is the Information Advice and Support Service network, which sits within the CDC, the Council for Disabled Children, and the National Children's Bureau. So although we were known as Norfolk SEND Partnership, so we had that national identification, we changed it to Norfolk SENDIAS. And also it's because it says what we do in our title. We are an information advice and support service. We are arm's length from local authority in health. We are impartial and confidential. And today's tribunal training will be confidential as well, so you can publish questions in the Q&A section of your little tabs at the top. My colleague Belinda, who's here with me today, will be keeping an eye on those questions and publishing them for me, and I will be looking at them as we go through the training, every couple of slides, and answering any questions. What I will say is I'm not able to answer any personal questions specific to your circumstances. And if you do have any questions that are specific to your circumstances, if they do come through, I might be able to try and answer a little bit, but I might advise that you contact our helpline, and that's because there may be questions that need to be asked, and then it might need to be a back and forward between an advisor and you to try and get down to the nitty-gritty of what's going on. But pop the question in there if you want to. If I think it's a bit personal and might need to go to our helpline, I'll advise you of that, but I will try and answer as much as I can. At the very end of today's training, an evaluation form and the link to the evaluation form will be put in the Q&A by my colleague Belinda. And if you would like the slides to today's training, then you can pop your email address in the evaluation form and we will get that sent out to you next week. But yeah, that's it really from me. So I think what we'll do is we'll get started with the tribunal training. I'll just check to see if we've got any questions initially. Let me just have a look. No, and that's absolutely fine. So like I say, pop those questions in the Q&A. If it's something that I'm a little bit struggle to answer, because although I've been doing this for many years, and I've been to tribunals and I've been doing the tribunal training for 3 years now, there still are questions that sometimes I have to go, oh, not quite sure of that, and I need to go away and check it. And if that's the case, if and I did that in the last tribunal training, because somebody wanted something specific in law and I couldn't remember it off the top of my head. If you pop your email address into the published section, if it's a question that either is asking for a very specific piece of law, or I'm not able to answer today because it's something I need to go and look up, then put your email address in and I will get back to you at some point next week. We won't publish your email address, that will be dismissed, so only myself and Belinda can see it, just in case. But otherwise I'll try and answer as much as I can in the Q&A section. Today's tribunal training, like I said, is going to cover appealing a final EHCP, and we will also touch upon health, education and social care, appealing health and social care, sorry. So with that, I'm just conscious our numbers have got spiked a little bit, so I'm just going to wait a minute because they've gone from not many to spiking up quite a bit. So I just want to say thank you to those that have attended. We've already kind of gone through some bits, but just some quick headlines. If you have any questions, please put them in the live event Q&A. I'm not able to answer any personal questions. If I do think it's personal, then I will advise that you contact our helpline and book an appointment to speak with an advisor, but I will try and answer what I can. We are in our service, Norfolk Sendias, are an impartial arm's length service, and we give information, advice and support on education and health and social care where it impacts on education. My name is Neve Keane and I'm the manager of the Sendias service. I've been here for over 5 years now, and I've sort of worked my way up to manager. What I'm going to do is I'm going to get started now. I'm hoping that we might be able to finish a little bit early because it is such a beautiful day outside, and I'm sure you're all itching to get outside. And I'm also going to take my camera off now, so you won't be able to see me, but you will be able to hear me still. Okay, so hopefully you can still hear me, and I'm going to start with today's tribunal training. So as I've already said, this is the tribunal training today is on how to appeal your final EHCP to the first tier tribunal. As I've said, we're Norfolk Sendias. We are part funded through Norfolk County Council Education and Norfolk and Waveney Clinical Commissioning Group, but we are impartial and arm's length. As I said at the beginning, we are part of the IASSN, the Information Advice and Support Service Network, that sits within the CDC, the Council for Disabled Children, and the National Children's Bureau. So the aims of today. So this is a list of the aims of what we're hoping that you will get from today's tribunal training. I will be honest, tribunal training is not the most exciting topic. It's not something that to be honest, it's quite dry, if I'm honest, but it's really important. And it's important, especially if you're going through the tribunal process at the moment, or you're expecting to go through the tribunal process quite soon, to understand the process of what you need to do, what the forms will look like, what the paperwork will look like, understanding your reasons for appealing and the evidence you need, and that kind of thing. But my primary aim today amongst this is to give you the confidence and empower you to be able to lodge that appeal and go through the appeals process. And as a service, we can help you and support you through each of the stages of the appeal. You can contact our helpline whenever you need help and speak with an advisor who can talk you through the appeals process, explain to you what it is that you need to do, how to fill in forms, that kind of thing. Why tribunal? Now, I know that all of you here are likely to be going to tribunal because you're disagreeing with the local authority's decision. Primarily, it will be Section I. Every time we do this tribunal training, especially around phase transfer, the reason that parent carers are going to tribunal is because they're unhappy with the decision that the local authority have made regarding Section I of the EHCP, which is the educational placement. The tribunal itself is independent of government and will listen to both sides of the argument, and the decision will be based on law, which is really important to note. That they will not take sides. They are completely impartial, completely independent, and will make their decision based on primarily the evidence that is provided. So it's really important that although the burden of proof in this tribunal appealing a final plan is on the local authority, which means it's the local authority who have to prove why they made those decisions. So although the burden of proof is on the local authority, you can't rely on that. You must submit your own evidence and create your own arguments. That's really, really important, because they will make their decision based on law, but that decision based on law will be on the evidence that's provided to them by the local authority and by the parent carer. This isn't an easy process and shouldn't be taken lightly. It can be hard work and it's emotional, but we as a service, so Norfolk CENDIAS, can support you, like I said, at each step of the way. There's also IPSI, who do some fantastic resources on their website. They also have a tribunal helpline, although that gets booked up quite quickly. And it's IPSI, in fact, who do all our training, our legal training. You may also be able to get legal aid, and you'll see as we go through today's tribunal training that there are some red hyperlinks. So when you get sent this, if you pop your name at the end into the evaluation form once you've completed it, because you want the slides from today, you will send you the slides, and then you'll be able to follow the hyperlinks to those pages. So if you think you might be eligible for legal aid, if you click on that red hyperlink there, that will take you to the page where you can see if you are eligible. Who can appeal? So parents of a child between 0 and 16 can appeal on behalf of their child or young person. They will make the decision as to what school that they are wanting for their child or young person to go to, and also whether they are happy with the contents of the plan, which we'll get on to in a little bit. If the young person is over school leaving age, so 16 and under 25, then it is that young person's responsibility to lodge the appeal. You as the parent carer can support them with this, and we will touch upon this a little bit later on when we're looking at filling in the form. But you are able to support them with it. But as a young person, between 16 and 25, it will be expected by the tribunal and in law that they take the lead on the appeal, they attend the hearing, and their voice is captured throughout. If the young person lacks capacity to appeal, based on the Mental Capacity Act 2005, a representative can appeal on their behalf. I think what I would say is if you have concerns that you feel a young person that you are supporting, or that your young person may lack capacity, then get in contact with the service and we can talk you through mental capacity, what is expected around mental capacity, and sort of what the bar in law is for mental capacity, and discuss that with you in more depth. But certainly it is expected, if they are between the ages of 16 and 25, they will be the ones that take the lead on their tribunal. What can you appeal? So as I said at the beginning, we are looking at the contents of an EHCP here. So we're looking at Section B, the educational needs, Section F, the educational provision, and Section I, the placement. As I've already said, I know that a lot of parent carers that come to our tribunal training are coming because they're unhappy with the decision made in relation to Section I, the placement. But it's really important we look at all three sections, and I'm going to get onto that as we go through today's tribunal training. That's really, really important. We always put this training on at this time of year, sort of between February, March and April, due to phase transfer, because that's when sort of the spike in tribunals happen, although I'm aware there are probably some of you in the room today, the virtual room, that are appealing not part of phase transfer just because you've got a plan, a final plan that you're unhappy with. We will also look at and touch upon the national trial recommendations on health and social care, which aren't actually trials anymore. So it was a national trial that came in 2018, and it has now been decided by the Tribunal Service that national trial health recommendations on health and social care is going to become a permanent fixture within the tribunal. But I will touch upon that later on. I've got a whole slide related to that. So when can you appeal? You must have a right of appeal given by the local authority to be able to lodge an appeal at a first tier tribunal. You can only get that right of appeal in the following ways: either following a final plan being issued or following an annual review of the EHCP. So what will happen is, so I'll go into this a little bit more in depth. So if this is your first plan and it's just been issued to you, you've not had an annual review, this is the first plan, you've gone from draft EHCP to final plan. If you receive that final EHCP and it doesn't name the placement you want, or you're unhappy with the needs and provisions, so sections B and S, you can lodge your appeal as soon as you get that letter from the local authority that says, here is your final EHCP. If you are unhappy, you can appeal. You have 2 months from that letter in which to lodge your appeal, and that's really, really important to remember. You only have 2 months, and that is a precedent set by the tribunal, not the local authority, but the tribunal. So it's really important you check the date of that letter and you make sure that you are within your 2 months. If you've just had an annual review of an EHCP, what will happen is, within 4 weeks of the review meeting, you will receive a decision letter from the local authority. And that decision letter is going to say one of 3 things. It's either going to say that they're going to cease the plan, which is very unlikely, so we're not looking at that. Or it's going to say one of the more likely things, which is to amend the EHCP or maintain the EHCP. Now, if they have sent you a letter within that 4 weeks, or up to 4 weeks after the meeting you have as part of the annual review, if that says maintain, that means the local authority are keeping the EHCP exactly the same as it is. They are not making any changes to it. So if at that meeting you said you wanted changes to either sections B and S or changes to section I, and you receive that letter that says maintain, that means the local authority are not making those changes. And so you have a right of appeal straight away. So as soon as you get that letter that says maintain, you have a right of appeal, and you have that 2 months from that letter sent by the local authority. And just to clarify, when I say letter, nowadays, due to the pandemic, this is coming in via email. So it will come to you in an email as an attachment of a letter. So make sure you keep an eye out in your emails, in your junk, to find that letter, to get that letter. If the decision letter says amend the EHCP, that means the local authority are going to do exactly that. They're going to amend the plan. Now, there have been some really fantastic, significant case law that has come out recently regarding annual reviews that has clarified a point in law around when amendments must be done by. So it should be done within 12 weeks. And if anyone wants to know that piece of that case law, pop it in the Q&A and I will find it for you and link it in the Q&A for you. What will happen is, similarly to when you had your final plan, the local authority will go away and write up a draft with the changes that they're recommending. Remember that in a draft EHCP, the placement won't be named. And then you will receive a draft copy of that EHCP. Go through it, and we'll talk about how to go through EHCPs a little bit later. Make sure you're happy with the changes, write in any amendments, that kind of thing. And at that point, you can name the school that you would like in the EHCP. If you then receive that final amended EHCP and it doesn't name the school you wanted or you requested, or it doesn't have the changes to B and F that you wanted, then you will have a right of appeal. So remembering that you can either appeal a final plan or following an annual review of the EHCP straight away if the decision letter says maintain, or following the final amended EHCP if the local authority chose to amend the plan. The really big thing to remember is that you only have 2 months, and it's really important you keep that in your mind, because if you are expecting a decision letter coming up soon following an annual review, or if you are expecting a final plan to be issued very soon, it's important that you remember you only have 2 months from that letter sent by the local authority giving you the right of appeal in which to start the process. It's also really important you keep that letter because you will need it later on to lodge your appeal. What to appeal? So if you're appealing the school college placement, and the likelihood is most of you here today are appealing the school or college placement, then we advise you to also look and appeal, if necessary, parts B, which are the needs, and parts F, which are the provision. It's really important you look at these 2 sections, and I'm going to get on to that a little bit later, how to do it and why to look at it. And that's because it's important that the plan, the EHCP, reads exactly like your child or young person with the needs and provision, because needs and provision should inform what is named in section I. And it's really important that B and F, those 2 sections, are specific, quantified, and strong. They show exactly why the school that you want for your child or young person is the only suitable school for them. And it's important that you go through those sections to make sure that there is nothing missing in the reports. Nothing in the reports that is missing from the EHCP. The other thing to note here, and it's really important, is that the EHCP must be written by the local authority based on your child or young person and not on the school or college that they will attend. It's really, really important. What you don't want is to go to an annual review, and it does happen. I've been at annual reviews where this has happened, and the school has said, we can't provide that type of provision, so we're going to remove it. No, that is absolutely not legal. They cannot remove a provision because the school or college feel they cannot provide it. It is the provision must be provided by the school, but it is ultimately the local authority who hold that overall right to provide it, and must support the school, college, wherever they're going to provide that provision. That provision is based on your child or young person and not on what the school can or cannot provide. I'm just going to stop there for a minute and check to see if we've got any questions. There aren't any questions I can see. And that's absolutely fine. That's not a problem. But like I say, if you do have any questions, please do pop them in the Q&A. Hopefully, like I said, the information I'm giving you is going to be enough to help you start this process. But if you do have any questions, please do pop them in the Q&A. So as there aren't any, I will get on with the next bit, and I will keep stopping every few slides to check if there are any questions. We've done that. We've done considering what to appeal. So how to read through an EHCP, how to read through a plan. So before deciding that you're only going to appeal section I of the EHCP, which, like I say, the majority of you here today are likely to want to do, we would really advise and recommend that you read through sections B and F. And this, like I said before, is to make sure that the EHCP is strong, specific, quantified, and there is nothing missing from the reports in the plan. That's really, really important. And it might be that you read through the EHCP, you read through the reports, and everything is in there. And you are absolutely happy with sections B and F. There is nothing in there you think needs changing. It's all specific, it's all quantified, and then you can go straight to tribunal for section I. But it's really important you do this, one, because it's making sure that, you know, the EHCP, which is going to be a big piece of evidence, shows that the school you want for your child is the only school that's suitable. but also because if it gets to tribunal and the tribunal panel look at it and think that the plan itself is not very specific or quantified, or there is missing information, and the plan itself doesn't reflect what you're asking, they may halt proceedings and say that you need to go away and look at B&S, which can lengthen your appeal time. So it's important to do it now whilst you're in that 2 months, so that you can sort of save yourself time at this end rather than make time at the other end. So we have a booklet, which I apologise, I know I said at the beginning everything would be hyperlinked in red, and this isn't red, it's orange. But we do have a booklet and it's hyperlinked there, and it's reading and understanding in EHCP. And this booklet talks in depth about how to go through a plan, how to look at sections B and S, what a need and provision is, and all of that. And I would really, really recommend that you have a look at that booklet and you use it as a guide when going through the EHCP to make sure that you're looking at everything correctly and you're doing what you need to do in regards to amendments, making sure that things aren't missing, that kind of thing. Like I said, it's important that you go through the reports, and all of these reports are listed in section K of the EHCP, which is normally at the back of the plan. Check firstly that all the reports are listed, and then make sure as you go through each report, which you should be sent with the final plan, identify all of the special educational needs and the special educational provision. And what we normally recommend doing is getting 2 different coloured highlighters, so yellow and green, for example, and going through the reports and highlighting every need in yellow and every provision in green. And then going through the EHCP, checking in section B for the needs, making sure that all the needs recognised in the reports have made their way into section B of the plan, and all of the needs in section F of the plan, all of the needs in the report, have made their way into section F of the plan. Make sure that all identified needs have a corresponding provision. That's really important, because what's the point of having a need listed if there isn't a provision in place to support that need? So it's important that there is that every need has an identified provision, but multiple needs can be met by one provision. So it might be that you have a chunk of 3 or 4 needs, and when you look at the provision, there's only one provision there. As long as that provision meets all 3 or 4 of those needs, that's absolutely fine. You don't need a provision for every need. You just need to make sure that every need has a provision. And that might be one provision meeting multiple needs. It's also worth going through sections G and H so that you can check to see if any provision is educational or training, because then it needs to be in section F. So for example, speech and language therapy. Now, although it's health that provide it, it is an educational provision because it trains. And so speech and language therapy, as an example, should be in section F of the EHCP. Something else I would really recommend you do, and it's something that over the years working for CENDIAF I've noticed, is that when you get a report, most of the time the reports will bullet point and list the needs and provisions, so they're really easy to identify because the report has listed it right there. It's really important that you look through the beginning paragraph, so the introduction, and the conclusion as well, because what I have seen is that in those introductions and conclusions, needs and provisions have also been listed in those sections. But because all the needs and provision are listed quite nicely in a little bullet point, and they can be just copied and pasted straight into the plan, sometimes what happens is those needs and provisions that are identified in the chunkier bits of the report, in the blurbs, get missed. So it's important you look in those sections. Now, if it's mentioned in those sections, but also in the bullet pointed section, you don't need to worry about it because it should already be in the plan. But if there are bits in there that are missing, it's important you highlight them ready to know that actually you're likely to need to appeal B&F as well as Section I. The other thing it's really important to look at when you're looking through a plan, and like I said, this reading and understanding booklet is going to go through all this with you in depth, and so use it as a guide. The other thing to look for is what we call woolly wording. And woolly wording is phrases like opportunities for, may benefit from, regular. Those are there are many of them, and they are in the reading and understanding in the HCP booklet, but there are many of them. Those are woolly words, they're woolly phrases because they aren't specific, and a plan should be specific. So if you see any phrases like that, so like I say, may benefit from, regular, access to, opportunities for, that kind of thing, it's important that you highlight them because you don't want them in the plan. So for example, if it says Timmy will have regular Lego therapy, what does regular mean? Because you regularly brush your teeth twice a day and you regularly go to the dentist once a year. So what does regular mean? What you want it to say is Timmy will have an hour of Lego therapy once a week with a teaching assistant that has been trained by a Lego therapist. Specific and quantified. So that's why it's important you don't have that woolly wording. Again, with benefit from. They benefit from what? Everyone might benefit from something, but it doesn't mean it needs to be provided. So it shouldn't say may benefit from, it should say will have, must have. So it's important you look through the plan and you look at those phrases, see if there are any in there, highlight them, cross them out, because then it's likely you're going to need to take that plan to the next stage, which is to appeal B&F, and we'll talk that through. I'm just going to stop to see if there are any questions, because I know that was quite a sizable, chunky slide and there was a lot of information in there. So could I have a link for the case law mentioned, please? Absolutely. In the break, because there will be a break, I will find the link to that case law and I will publish it in the Q&A. Can you please tell me where to find in law the part about the provision should be quantified? Yes, absolutely. Again, in the break, I will find that for you and I will put it in the link, put the link into the Q&A for you to have that. It's in the Code of Practice and it's also in the Children and Families Act. So I will find that for you and get that put in the Q&A box. Okay, those are the only two questions. So like I say, in the break, I'll find them and I'll put them in the Q&A for you. So needs and provision. It's really important when looking through the EHCP and through the reports that you distinguish between what a need is and what a provision is, and know and recognise what they are so that you're able to find them in the reports and in the EHCP. So a need is not the diagnosis. That's really important to remember. So a diagnosis, for example, is ADHD. That's the diagnosis. But then, so a young person finding it hard to stay focused in a noisy, busy classroom and being easily distracted is the need. The diagnosis is the umbrella. You could have 10 children in a line with ADHD and each of them will have very different needs and very different presentation. So we're not looking for the diagnosis, we're looking for the need. The need is the difficulty that the child has, not the diagnosis, but how the diagnosis affects their education, their barriers to learning. The provision is the support the child or young person then must have to meet that need. So for example, pupil X will have a separate desk with a screen to minimise the classroom distraction. He will have hover classroom support to prompt him to stay on task. That's a need, that's a provision. So when you're going through the EHCP and the reports, it's really important that you're looking for those needs and those provisions. And like I said, in the previous slide, that reading and understanding booklet can help you use it as a guide when you're going through the EHCP and the reports. Needs and provision equal placement. So if B&F are strong, specific and quantified, this should then inform the placement. Now, I know that there are probably many of you here today saying, well, the reason that the local authority didn't name the placement I wanted is because there isn't any space. And that is true. We know that that's happening in special schools. We know that the local authority aren't naming special schools because they don't have the space, and we'll get onto the legal test for that a little bit later. But it's still really important that you go through B&F to make sure that those needs and provision equal the placement that you want. So if you are looking for a special school, it's making sure that those needs and those provisions signal that the only school you want is the only suitable school for your child or young person. So as I've said, every need identified in section B must have a provision in section F to meet that need, but remember, one type of provision can meet multiple needs. And I know, as I've said it before, it needs to be specific and quantified. And I know it's repeating myself a little bit, but it's really important to remember this, and it's important that you go through B&F before deciding whether you're just going to appeal the placement or not, because your EHCP is going to be a big piece of your evidence. And so the EHCP needs to signal that the only placement suitable is the placement you want. So I've put in there some definitions of specific and quantified. So specific, clearly defined or identified, and quantified, to measure or judge the size or amount of something. So an example there is, child X will have 30 minutes of one-to-one speech and language therapy 2 times a week for 3 months, provided by a trained speech and language therapist to be reviewed after 8 sessions. That's what we want in a specific and quantified provision. I've put a quote in there at the bottom as well from the Code of Practice, paragraph 9.61, and it says EHC plans should be clear, concise, understandable and accessible to parents, children, young people, providers and practitioners. They should be written so they can be understood by professionals in any local authority. And this is really important. An EHCP should be a document that when picked up by anybody, it is understood, it is clear, they know exactly the needs of that child or young person, and they know the provision that needs to be put in place. So if, for example, you were to ever move to another local authority, they would be able to look at the plan that is there and use it. If your child or your young person were to ever look at that plan, they would be able to understand it as well. So mediation. Just before we get on to mediation, actually, I'm just going to stop and have a look and see if we've got any questions. So no, we don't, and that's absolutely fine. I will get back on with mediation. So at this point, you will have looked through B&F of the EHCP. Now, if you decide that you do want to appeal B&F of the plan, you must consider mediation. This is really important. You cannot go straight to appeal on B&F. You can only go straight to appeal to tribunal on section I. You must consider mediation if you are choosing to appeal B&F. To consider mediation, you must call them on that number there, and this is with Kids Mediation Service in Norfolk, and you will be booked in for a MIAS, which is a mediation information awareness session, where an independent mediator will explain the process and your options. Your 2 options essentially will be, and they'll discuss it in more depth with you, but your 2 options essentially will be bypass the mediation, get the mediation certificate and take the F&I straight to appeal to tribunal. The other option is that you attend mediation, you take the amendments that you want to your plan to mediation with the local authority, and you try and make those changes. Now, mediation can be a really fantastic tool to try and get those changes made prior to the appeal itself. And what the tribunal will expect is that you will try and iron out those amendments that you want to B&F before you get to the hearing, the day of the hearing. They will want as much sorted within B&F before you get to the hearing. So mediation can be a really useful tool. With mediation, if you choose to go to the mediation meeting, it will be between you an independent mediator from Kids Mediation Service, and a representative from the local authority that has decision-making powers. Generally, it will be an EHCP coordinator from Norfolk County Council that will attend. You may already know them, they may already be your coordinator, and they will have the ability to make decisions on B&F and the amendments that you would. So as I say, mediation can be a really useful tool. If at the mediation meeting you get full agreement of the changes you wanted to B&F, at that point you can proceed to tribunal for just Section I alone. If you only get partial agreement, so the local authority makes some of the amendments that you wanted but not all of them, then you can go to appeal for B, F and I. Something else to be aware of is once you've either considered or participated in mediation, you will be issued a mediation certificate within 3 days, and you will need to lodge that if you're going to appeal for Section B and F. So if you only make partial agreement at the mediation meeting, you will need that mediation certificate because that will form part of your evidence. You have to send that in, otherwise the tribunal will not lodge your appeal without it. So you must get that mediation certificate. Again, it's remembering you only have 2 months from the formal local authority decision, that decision letter, to lodge your appeal, or 1 month from the mediation certificate, whichever is later. So, for example, if you were given the right of appeal on the 5th of February, you'll have till the 5th of April in which to lodge your appeal, because that's your 2 months from the local authority. If you receive your mediation certificate on the 1st of April, that will extend your time till the 1st of May in which to lodge your appeal. So it's whichever is the later. But if, for example, you were to get your right of appeal on the 5th of February and you had till the 5th of April to lodge your appeal, but you got your mediation certificate on the 7th of February and that took you to the 7th of March, you would still have your later date of the 5th of April in which to lodge your appeal. It's also important to note that once you contact mediation, Kids Mediation, to consider consider a B&F appeal, you are stopping the clock on your appeal time. So as soon as you contact Kids Mediation Services, even if it's a voicemail, that halts the clock. That 2 months stops at that point. So you could literally be the day before your 2 months is up, and as soon as you contact Kids Mediation Service, that stops the clock on your 2 months, and then you will proceed with your mediation. You'll get your mediation certificate and have that further month in which to lodge your appeal. So if you are today at that point where you are coming up to the end of your 2 months, it's really worth contacting Kids Mediation to stop the clock on your 2 month appeal time and to consider B&F as well. Appealing health and social care, I touched upon it really briefly at the beginning there. So what we're going to talk, so we're going to talk about appealing health and social care. So on the 3rd of April 2018, which I did mention briefly at the beginning, a 2-year national trial began known as the Single Route of Redress. And under that trial, the health and social care aspects of the plan, as well as the educational elements, can be appealed. What I will say is you cannot appeal the health and social care aspects of the plan without appealing an educational element, so either B, F or I. You have to appeal either B, F or I to be able to appeal health or social care. SENDIST, who are the tribunal service, will have the power to make recommendations on health and social care needs or provision, and then must send a copy of those recommendations to health commissioners, the local authority for social care. The tribunal only has the power to make non-binding recommendations on health and social care, but it is very clear, and it has been made very clear to local authorities and CCGs, that the expectation is that the recommendation will generally be followed. An independent evaluation of the trial found positive findings, and in 2021, so last year, the Department of Education confirmed that the extended powers given to the tribunal will continue. SENDIST, by the way, stands for Special Educational Needs Disability Tribunal. So SENDIST, you'll hear it being called the First Tier Tribunal or SENDIST. They're exactly the same thing, and that's where you go to lodge your appeal. If the recommendations are not going to be followed either by the local authority for social care or by the CCG for health, those bodies, either the social care local authority or CCG for health, will need to write to the parent, carers or young person and the tribunal within 5 weeks explaining why they have decided not to follow the recommendations. If you're unhappy with that decision and you disagree with why they're not going to follow those recommendations, you can make a complaint to the local government and social care ombudsman regarding social care, or the Parliamentary and Health Service Ombudsman regarding health. You can also seek a judicial review of the decision, but if you are looking to go down the route of judicial review, you will need to instruct a solicitor or a legal representative to start those proceedings. That is something we can briefly discuss with you, but our primary advice would be that if you are going down the review, that you need to speak with a solicitor or a legal representative about judicial proceedings. Okay, so I'm just going to have a quick look and see if we've got any questions. So I've got here, can you please repeat the woolly words? So like I said, that booklet, the Reading and Understanding booklet, will have the woolly words in there, but there are lots of woolly words and woolly phrases, but some are regular, opportunities for, may benefit from, regular, opportunity for, may benefit from. Now I'm forgetting them. Yeah, but there are lots of types of woolly wording, and that booklet, like I said, will help you with that. Apologies if you can hear my dog in the background. He is barking at the postman. Okay, he's stopped now. The joys of working from home and the joys of trying to do some training from home. So again, I apologise for that if you can hear him. Bear with me 1 second, I'm going to get him in here, hang on. There we go, apologies for that. Like I say, joys of working from home and having a dog that doesn't like the postman. I've just seen someone say my dog just replied. I'm so sorry. It is really awkward when you're in meetings or doing training and you've got a dog that just, you know, decides they're going to bark constantly. So there's a couple more questions that have come through. So can you please link the booklet again? So the booklet is linked. The booklet is linked within the presentation. So if you want the presentation at the end of today's tribunal training, you will be able to pop your email address into the evaluation bit at the end, and we will send you the presentation. Alternatively, you can just go onto our website. And you can find the booklet. It's under booklets on our website, and it's Reading and Understanding in EHCP. Can you repeat mediation date to lodge appeal? So, like I say, it's 2 months in which to lodge your appeal from the decision letter from the local authority, or 1 month from the mediation certificate, whichever is later. And that is in the slide. And so, like I said just then, if you want the slides, you can, at the very end, pop your email address in the evaluation form, and we'll get those sent out to you next week. Would throughout the day be woolly? This is a very, very good question. So it depends on what the provision is. So that's a really good question. It really depends what the question is. It really depends what the provision is. If it's, say, for example, something like a therapy or something like that, throughout the day is not going to cut it. If it's like visual timetable, so Timmy will use their visual timetable throughout the day. That's okay, because it's saying that they should use that visual timetable throughout the school day. If it's something like Lego therapy, I know I keep mentioning it, but it's just what's in the top of my head. If it's something like Lego therapy, that should be far more specific. It depends on what the provision is, and it depends how it's phrased. Generally, throughout the day can be quite a woolly phrase, and so it might be worth looking at what the provision is and seeing if we can tighten that up a little bit. So like I said, you will get the evaluation form, a link to the evaluation form at the end of today's tribunal training in the Q&A box. If you want the slides from today's tribunal training, then you can pop your email address in that evaluation form and we'll get those sent out to you next week. But some really good questions there. So, and again, apologies for my dog. So let's crack on with the next bit. We've done appealing health and social care. Eye placement, and there is going to be a break. And like I said at the beginning, hopefully, because we're quite a small group, we'll be able to get through today's training quicker than the 3 hours. The last two tribunal trainings we've done, they've been fairly big groups. The last one we did was 70 odd people, and it went over the 3 hours. So because we're quite a fairly small group today, hopefully we'll get through the training quite quickly. So section I placement. The likelihood that most of you are here is because you are looking to appeal section I because you're unhappy with the educational placement that's been named. So the local authority, you can ask the local authority to name any one of these placements. So maintain nursery school, maintain school, or any form of academy or free school, a non-maintained special school, a further education or sixth form college, or an independent school or independent specialist college if they are section 41. Now, I'm just going to talk a little bit there about section 41. So if you are saying that you want a wholly independent school that is not section 41, such as Acorn Park, St Andrews, Lessingham All Saints, Aurora Eccles, just to name a few, the local authority do not have to name them. They do not have to consult with them. And equally, if that independent school says they cannot meet need or they don't have space, then unfortunately the local authority and the tribunal do not have the jurisdiction to name them. We only have one section 41 school in Norfolk, and that is Sheridan. We also have Brantfield, which is in Suffolk, but that's just on the border. And we do have lots of children and young people go to Brantfield on the border. I supported a parent with the process of getting Brantfield, which is just on the border, and that is a section 41 school. And that means if they're a section 41, that you can ask the local authority to name them, and that if the local authority don't, you can appeal for that school, even if the school say no. There's something to bear in mind. So section I placement. So we're coming on to the sort of nitty-gritty now of the legal test with placement. So we know, I know, and you will know that the reason the local authority are primarily not naming specialist schools at the moment is because they don't have the space. And the legal test for this is the provision of efficient education for other children, because the attendance of a child or young person would be incompatible with the provision of efficient education for other children and the provision of efficient use of resources. So that's the legal reason. So if you were to go to tribunal, the legal reason the local authority will give is that the attendance of your child or young person is incompatible with one of those two reasons, that legal test. The local authority, if you put a school to the local authority, they must name that school unless one of those legal reasons. Now, recently I have seen coming through our helpline the local authority saying no because the school that the parent carer wants is unsuitable for the age, ability, aptitude, or SEN of the child or young person. What I would say is, if you are looking for a special school or any school, as long as it's not a wholly independent school like I talked about previously, then you can appeal for it, even if they say no, even if the local authority brings one of these legal tests about it. As I said, it's very right at the beginning. The burden of proof is on the local authority to establish which of these are applicable, as in these legal tests. But you cannot rely on this, and you will need to provide evidence and reasons for your preference. So it's really important to remember, and we are going to get onto evidence, but it's really important to remember that. It's also important to think that if the school has said no, or the local authority has said no, due to the unsuitability of the age, ability, aptitude, or SEN of the child or young person. So, for example, if you are wanting a school like Parkside, but the school and the local authority are saying that the child or young person is too able for their school, that may make your tribunal a little bit harder, because you are going to have to show that your child's needs can be met, even though they are saying that they can't be met because they are unsuitable for the age, ability, aptitude, or SEN of the child. It's important to be aware that it can make that appeal a little bit harder. As I've put at the bottom here, if you've been turned down for a complex needs school, a special school, the reason is likely to be that the school is full. This is not an argument in law, and the local authority is likely to apply the inefficient education of others and/or resources. Remember, though, that it is about whether just your child or young person will have an impact so great that it will affect the education of others, and the local authority will have to prove this. An example being, and this is a tribunal I supported with, the local authority in the school said that the legal test, the provision of the attendance of a child or young person is incompatible with the provision of efficient education for other children and the provision of efficient use of resources. When we got to the tribunal, the local authority was still saying that, the school was still saying that, and actually it resolved itself because the school said if we had an additional TA in that class, we would be able to take this child or young person. And so that is what the tribunal ruled. The tribunal ruled that an additional TA would go into that classroom so that that child would be able to be in that school in that class. So it resolved itself to the parent's satisfaction. It's always important to remember whether that child or young person will have such a great impact that it will affect the education of others. Sometimes tribunals will rule that classes need to be split to accommodate extra children. So it is worth going to appeal. The other thing to talk about here, and just to mention, is the provision of efficient use of resources. If you are looking for an independent school, whether it be a Section 41 or whether it be a wholly independent school, the local authority may say no, even if the school have said yes, because of the cost. With independent schools, the costs that they charge are considerably higher than a maintained special school, for example, or a mainstream school. They are considerably higher. And so what the local authority might say is that there is a maintained special school or a mainstream school that is able to meet the needs just as well as the independent school, and that's why they're not naming the independent school. And they will use that legal test of incompatible with the provision of efficient use of resources. Essentially, they have to look at the public purse, and if it is fair to be spending that money on that child or young person attending that school, that independent school, if their needs can be met at a school that is less cost. And the tribunal will also have to look at the public purse as well. They have to see whether it is right and fair to name an independent school if there is a school, an alternative school, that is cheaper in cost that can meet needs. So again, something to bear in mind. That's why it's important that you look at B&S and make sure that the plan signals that the only school that can meet needs is the school that you're requesting. How's the lodge your appeal? And I'm just going to stop there very, very quickly to see if we've got any questions. Are the LA obligated to issue meeting minutes after panel meetings regarding the placement? They aren't obligated to issue the meeting minutes, but what there should be complete transparency with what the panel has said, what their response is. And what I would say is, if you do want the meeting minutes, and this is something I do advise parent carers to get when in the process of appealing, and I have done it myself with parents when I've supported them in the appeal process, is to do a subject access request and to ask for those panel meeting minutes. And the reason I say that is because, one, you'll also be able to see what they say, but two, you can use that as evidence to show whether the local authority have consulted with what they have said they have consulted with, if they have consulted with multiple schools, when they consulted with them, what the results were, etc. So it can be good. It can be good evidence. So I would suggest, and we will get onto evidence, but I would suggest, as part of your evidence, asking for subject access request for panel meeting minutes. And just be aware that a lot of those minutes will be redacted because they will be more than just your child talks about. They may even just give you the very, very small bit about your child or young person. Next question, as it would impact the children. I'm not sure if that's a question or what that's about. Just as it would impact the children. If that's a question, if you can put it back into the chat so we can answer it for you. Next question. If the child was previously excluded due to bad behaviour, would they use this as a reason to not take the child in? No, they wouldn't. They can't use that. Again, like I say, it's only the legal tests. They can only use those legal tests when looking at an EHCP. The local authority can only use those 3 legal tests there when they say no. So either age, ability, aptitude, or send of the child. And when we talk send, it's not because they have bad behaviour. It might be that that school can't meet the needs of that child because their send is not for that child. So, for example, I'm trying to think. Say, for example, Duke of Lancaster, which we know takes those children and young people on the autistic spectrum with communication and learning difficulties. They're quite specific in what they have with their cohort of students. If you're saying that you want a child or young person to go in there, for example, with wholly a physical disability, then it's probably not the right school for them. So that's what they mean. Okay, so those are the only 2 questions, but good questions, good questions. Okay, so we'll get back on and do the next bit. I think we're coming up to a break fairly soon, and I must remember at that break to get those 2 links, the case law link and the link to quantification. So I will do that, and I'll put that in the Q&A. So let's get started. Okay. Lodge your appeal. So again, like I said a minute ago, we're getting into that nitty-gritty now of what to do around your appeal. So I know I bang on about it constantly, but it's remembering you've got 2 months from the date of the decision letter from the local authority or 1 month from the mediation certificate, whichever is later. You must consider mediation unless only appealing the named school. But as I've spent quite a long time talking about, it's really, really important that you go through B&S and make sure you don't need to appeal those 2 sections. To start your appeal, to lodge your appeal, you must complete a SEND 35 form, and I've hyperlinked it there. So again, like I said, when you get the evaluation form at the end today, if you would like a copy of these slides, fill in the evaluation form, put your email address in there, and we will get you the slides out next week. But you must complete that appeal form, that SEND 35 form. There is also a recording on our website. It takes you to YouTube, and it's recorded by our counterparts in Suffolk, so Suffolk SENDIAS, and it takes you through how to fill in a SEND 35 form bit by bit. So if you are struggling with the SEND 35 form, please do have a look at our website. We have lots of resources on there and booklets, and we do have a link to that web page, that YouTube page, which will help you with filling in the SEND 35 form. You need to send a copy. Now, if you're going to do this electronically, it depends how you choose to do this, either electronically or by post. It's up to you. What I will say is that at the moment, due to COVID, Darlington, which is where the tribunal sits, their base of operations, they are working from home. And so if you do choose to send it in by post, just be aware it may take a little bit more time to register it because they are working from home still. If you are going to send it in by post, make sure you send it in recorded delivery, and make sure that all the documents you send with it, so your reports from Section K, your mediation certificates, and the letter from the local authority, all are photocopied. Do not send in originals. That's really important to note. Do not send in originals because you don't want them to get misplaced or lost. If you are going to send it by email, that's probably the quicker way to do it, and you don't need to photocopy any of your information. And the likelihood is, with the way things are at the moment, you already have the EHCP, the mediation certificate, the reports, and the letter from the authority that gives you the right of appeal sent to you via email anyway. I've put in a link there so you can send your form and attachments electronically to that email address. And at the very end of the slide, there is also the address for Darlington where you can send your paper copy to. It's really important that you, in the SEND 35 form, at the back of the SEND 35 form, there is a list of documents that you must send with your SEND 35 form, that you must send with it to be able to lodge your appeal. Okay, so that's really important. I'm just going to check if there are any questions quickly, so bear with me 1 second. Okay, so the only question we've got is, if the SAR was requested on the 2nd of March and the reply was extended to the 2nd of June, can the local authority prolong it that far? So if the SAR was requested, they have 30 days in which to get you what it is that you've requested. They can extend that time. There is nothing that says they can't extend it by however long. They can extend it, but they have to give good reason as to why they've extended it. So it needs to say, for example, they haven't, if you haven't given enough information and they've had to extend it because they can't find what it is that you want, or they're not sure of what it is that you want, that might be a reason to extend it. They can't just extend it for no reason. They have to have given a reason as to why they've extended it. They do have 30 days in which to get that to you, so pretty much a month. And I would suggest going back to the local authority and asking, if you don't already know, why they've prolonged it till the 2nd of June. What was the reason for that? You just put in there COVID. So COVID can't be used. So this is something to be aware of for everyone here today. COVID cannot be used as an excuse anymore for anything in regards to their legal obligations. And that's because, well, COVID hasn't ended, but the laws around the amendments to those laws have now changed, and they have gone back to what they were originally. So there is now no longer those amendments to law. So that's just something to bear in mind there. So we'll just get back to it. We've done how to lodge your appeal. What the form must include. So the form must include the name and address of the applicant, so whether that's you or the young person. As I mentioned at the beginning, if a young person is between 16 and 25, they must lodge this appeal themselves, but they may want to add their parent on the farm as an advocate, because the parent will not have an automatic right to take part if they are not in the 1035 form as an advocate. It's also important that the form has the name and address of a representative if you have one. You do not need to have a representative. This is a tribunal. Firstly, the tribunal is free. It costs nothing for a parent carer to attend or to go to tribunal. And secondly, the tribunal do not expect you to have any legal representation or support from a solicitor. If you really, really do want support from a solicitor, and like I said, it is not expected and it is not needed, but if you do really, really want support from a solicitor, please make sure that the solicitor you are looking at has good knowledge and has done cases in SEND tribunals previously and has experience of education law. And the reason I say that is because I have supported someone in the past, spoken to someone in the past who had support from a solicitor who actually turned out to be a conveyancing solicitor, had never done tribunal, had no idea of education law, and that solicitor ended up actually coming to me for advice and support because they didn't understand the process. Education law is distinctly different to other pieces of law, other areas of law. And so it's important that if you are looking for a solicitor, you look for a solicitor that already has understanding and knowledge in this area. You can also put on there if you have an advocate. So as I said before, if you are the parent carer of a young person over 16, put yourself down as an advocate. You may have an advocate from a charity. So somebody might be supporting you from, for example, SEND Network or Sensational Families, or you may even have an advocate from our service, SENDIAS, because we do support with casework. What I will say is at the moment, unfortunately, we are not supporting with casework, and that is because we are incredibly busy on the helpline. And so we are trying to, we have given our advisors more hours on the helpline to try and sort out the backlog, but that is starting to become better now. So I'm hoping that advisors will start to be able to take casework probably from next month again, but we'll see where we're at next month. You must also include whose decision you're appealing. So in this case, it will be Norfolk Local Authority. The result you're seeking, so what school it is that you're wanting, and if you're taking B&F to appeal, what changes to B&F you're wanting. The grounds or the reasons that you're relying on. For example, you can say that the EHCP makes it very, very clear, the reports make it very, very clear that a special school is the only school that's going to be suitable, but a mainstream has been named. And then the documents listed in section 10 of the appeal form, which I've already touched upon in the previous slide. In the previous slide, I talked about filling in a SEND 35 form and the YouTube video, and that's a link to it there actually. So as I said throughout, if you are looking to get these slides at the end of today's tribunal training, please pop your name in the evaluation form that will be sent out, and we'll send that out to you. Bargain buster. Okay, so this is really a really good thing to have on you. as you're going through the process, so you understand what these words mean. I'm not going to go through all of them. There are two that I'm going to touch upon specifically, and that is paper hearing and oral hearing. So a paper, and in the 735 form, you have the ability to make a decision as to whether you want a paper hearing or an oral hearing. So this is, I'm going to talk those through now, the differences in them, so that you have an understanding, so that when you come to fill in the 735 form, you're informed and you know which to pick. A paper hearing is an appeal on the papers only. Generally, a paper hearing is used for a refusal to assess, sometimes a refusal to issue, and very, very occasionally for the contents of a plan appeal. What it essentially means is you do not attend a hearing. You will have no ability at a hearing, as you would if you were going orally, to put your side across, to answer any questions, to say anything you're unhappy with, to discuss your evidence. It will be papers only. So they will look at the evidence you have submitted, the evidence that the tribunal have submitted, and they will go based on that solely. The papers the local authority have submitted, and they will go on that solely. If you were to choose an oral hearing, that's where you attend in person to a hearing, and we'll touch upon what's happening now, which is virtual hearings versus face-to-face hearings a little bit later. But an oral hearing essentially is where you attend a hearing, you attend with a judge and a tribunal member and the local authority, and you have that ability to answer questions, have witnesses with you, have those witnesses answer questions from the tribunal, the local authority, etc. So it's important to know what you want. I would always say that with a paper hearing, they can be fantastic, but it does take your ability to have that two-way conversation, put your points across and your evidence across. It takes that ability away because it's on the papers only. There's something just to bear in mind. Now, what may also happen is if, for example, you tick one or the other, so in the 735 form, you tick paper hearing, you might get halfway through your process and the tribunal look at that you've ticked paper hearing. They might feel that there's not enough evidence there for paper hearing alone, and they may say that they are recommending it be an oral hearing. And then again, that might happen with an oral hearing. You might tick that you want an oral hearing. They may look at it as part of case management and say, actually, there's enough evidence here for us to make this on the papers. Let's make this paper hearing. But just something to bear in mind, something to be aware of. These are the two options. Something I'm also going to touch upon here, actually, is something called a JDAR. And some of you may have heard of it or may not. It's new it's been in the last sort of year, I'd say. I've been to JDAR before. That's JADR, and it stands for Judicial Alternative Dispute Resolution. These are becoming extremely popular for the tribunal. And what happens is the tribunal now as well are actively case managing all tribunal cases. So they are a judge, which may not be the judge that you get at your final hearing, but a judge will actively look at your case at different stages to see if it's on track to be heard for your hearing date, or if it needs to be extended. So it's being aware that one, tribunals are actively case managing now, which they weren't prior to sort of COVID, but are now. And two, JDARs, Judicial Alternative Dispute Resolution, are being used more and more. And this is a process where about 2 weeks before your final hearing, you will be informed that there is going to be a JDAR meeting where yourself, a tribunal judge, but not the judge that will be in your hearing itself, and the local authority will get together, and the tribunal will have a conversation with both of you. The judge, will have a conversation with both of you about what their position is based on the evidence at the moment. So they may say to you, at the moment, your evidence isn't strong enough to support what you're asking for. Or they may say to the local authority, there is not enough evidence here as to why you've not named the school the parent wanted. These are to talk through these things and make each party aware of where the tribunal is at based on the evidence. These JDARs are completely confidential and cannot be referred to during your main hearing. They cannot be discussed, they cannot be referred to or brought up. They are completely confidential between those involved in that JDAR. That doesn't mean your hearing won't take place at a later date. It's just making those aware from the local authority and from you what the tribunal's position is based on the evidence that has been supplied, and making you pre-aware for when the hearing takes place of what the outcome may be. And that may be, and I've seen it happen, that following a JDAR, the local authority are aware that they're not likely to win the hearing, and so they concede and give you the placement that you want. I've also been at JDARs where the tribunal have said to the parent that their position is not very strong on the placement they want, but they've still proceeded to the hearing. So it depends. JDAR can again be a very useful tool. So if you're invited to one, there is an expectation you go, but two, you do go, you listen to both sides and you hear what is being said. So I'm just going to stop there and see if we've got any questions, because I know that that's a lot of information to take in. You do not have a copy of a report as dated 2016. Where do you stand? Excellent question. If you don't have the copy of the report, either go back to the local authority or EHCP coordinator and ask them to send you a copy of the report, or if you remember who the report writer was, go back to them and ask you to send you a copy of the report. But that should not be a problem. You can just ask them to forward you that copy. Next one, the reply regarding the subject access request. Unfortunately, we're still experiencing delays due to our usual processes as a consequence of the previous COVID-19 restrictions. For this reason, I've extended the deadline for our response to your request. I anticipate being able to provide a response by the 2nd of June. I would suggest going back and saying, depending on when your hearing date is and when your evidence deadline is, and I am going to come on to that in a little bit, I would suggest going back and arguing that and saying, actually, you need this prior to this date for your evidence deadline, and that you are requesting it. You have given them enough time to get it to you and provide information. So I would go back and argue that if it's being used as part of evidence for a tribunal. Is the helpline able to help with appeals for an EOTAS? Absolutely. So EOTAS, for those here that may not know what that stands for, is education other than at school. We absolutely can support with EOTAS. I have supported with EOTAS in the past. I have an advisor currently who is supporting as a caseworker with an EOTAS appeal. Although, like I said, we're not taking any new cases currently. But absolutely, if you are going to appeal for EOTAS, please do get in contact with us, because we can absolutely support and advise you on that throughout the process. Could you please say those charities again for support? Absolutely. So there's a couple within Norfolk that might be able to support you with appeal. So you've got SCN Network and Sensational Families, who are now part of NANSA. Like I said, we absolutely can support you through our helpline with appealing. So you can contact us as many times as you need to ask us questions, to go through case directions, to go through forms, anything like that. We can help you as many times as you need to on our helpline with an appeal. So again, us, Sendias, can help you with that as well. Okay, that's it for the questions, but they have been excellent questions, so fantastic. Let's get back. I think we're coming up close to a break. I know I've said that before, but I really do think we are coming up close to a break. And like I said at the beginning, I know that tribunal training is quite dry. It's not always the most interesting or the most fun, but it is really important that you know how to go about this process, what to do, what things mean, and how to start this process, and feeling empowered to be able to do it as well, which is what I'm hoping this training is helping you to do. So we've done Jargon Buster, so let's look at timetable. So once you have lodged your appeal, the tribunal will then register the appeal within 10 working days. What I will say is that currently, and I only found this out yesterday from the Tribunal Service themselves in an email, is that they are taking around 20 working days to register the appeal. This is because they have got unprecedented numbers of appeals coming through, and I say this every year that we do the tribunal training. They've got unprecedented numbers coming through, and unfortunately, the appeals coming through are increasing year on year. And this year, again, they have unprecedented numbers coming through, just like we as a service have currently got unprecedented numbers of parent carers coming to us on the helpline, which is why we are so busy, and which is why our wait list is so long. So it's just something to bear in mind, something to be aware of. If you get to your 20 working days of sending off your appeal paperwork and you still haven't heard anything, firstly check your junk, because they will be sending you your pack of information in an email, because again, they're working from home. Check your junk. If you still haven't received it in your junk, then get in contact with Darlington. And like I said, at the end of this presentation is a link an address and telephone number for Darlington. In the email that you get back that says the tribunal have registered the appeal, you will get a pack of information that details the date of the hearing, your right to request that your appeal be actively case managed, although I will say that they are actively case managing all cases now, an attendance form, and a request for changes form, which I've also hyperlinked. You will also receive something called case directions, and this is a timetable of what will happen and when, and these are generally at the back of your big document in a table, and it will tell you when the local authority have to have their response in by, when you have to have your evidence in by, when the local authority has to have their evidence in by, when the bundle will be created, and when the hearing is. It's so important that when you get this document, when you get this timetable, you write these dates somewhere that you are able to remember. So either on your phone calendar, on a physical calendar, in a diary. I had, again, someone that I supported a long time ago printed that paperwork off and stuck it on the back of their bedroom door, so that every day they would look at it and see if that was the day they needed to do something by. It's important that you do that and you know when these dates are by, because if you, for example, miss your evidence deadline, the local authority then don't have to accept late evidence. I will get onto evidence in a bit, but it's really important that you read those dates, you have those dates somewhere that you can remember them, somewhere you can look at them, and you follow them. So that is really, really important, and I can't emphasize it enough how important it is that you look at those dates and you keep to those dates. At the same time that the tribunal send you this information, they will also send the local authority a copy of the notice to appeal, the date of hearing, in case all of the information that you have been sent, the local authority will be sent as well. At that point, they will know that you are appealing, what you are appealing for, and that's when it kickstarts the process for the local authority with a service within Norfolk County Council, called NP Law, which stands for Norfolk Public Law, and they are the ones who will represent the local authority at tribunal. This is a timetable of what should happen in regards to the hearing all the way to decision. So it should take 14 weeks all in all. Like I said, though, unfortunately, it is taking longer because there are unprecedented numbers of appeal. But it's one thing I want to bring up here that's really important to note is you will not get your decision from the tribunal on the day of your hearing. You will get it up to 2 weeks after your hearing. So you'll have to wait 2 weeks to get the tribunal's decision. This is a good sort of good to follow, but we know that it's taking longer at the moment because of those unprecedented numbers, but it's important that it's there for you to look at. Well, I thought we were coming up to it, and we are. So we're there. We're at that 10-minute break. So before we go on a break, I'm just going to check if there's any questions. And then I will go on that break and find those 2 pieces of information to put in there. So we've got 1 question. So if in section B, the quotes are still referring to reports dating back to 2016 and had not been updated, is this a case for appeal? So this is a fantastic question. So the tribunal will expect that reports are within a certain date still relevant, and they say normally around 2 years. Now, obviously, we know 2016 is considerably more than 2 years. If that evidence is still in date, and I'm going to say that the likelihood is it isn't, but if it is still in date and the information within that 2016 report is still relevant, then you can still use that as evidence. It can still be, used, etc. If it isn't relevant anymore and it is out of date, I would say that as part of your case management with your with the judge and the hearing, you explain to them that the reports are out of date, no longer applicable. The local authority have not updated them since 2016, and you would like an updated report because needs have changed. Information in the plan is no longer correct, it's out of date, and the tribunal has the ability to make the local authority do a new report as part of the evidence. So it's worth thinking about. It really depends on whether that information from that 2016 report is still in date. Okay, so we've got no other questions. So I'm just going to have a quick look at the time. So the time is 11:33. 11:30. So if we come back for bang on 11:45, so have a 10-minute break. We'll come back for 11:45 and we'll get on with the second half of the training, which is a shorter section. So hopefully we'll be done a little bit quicker than the 1 o'clock. So it'll be less than the 3 hours. And what I will do is in this time, I'll find those 2 bits of information and link them in the Q&A. So I will see everyone in 10 minutes. Give it another minute because I'm just going to type in there. I don't know if you can see, but Belinda, my colleague, has put a link in there to the case law that we talked about earlier on, and that is a link to our webpage, so Norfolk Sendias's webpage, to our newsletter. Because last month in March, I wrote a article on the case law that had been announced in regards to annual reviews. So that's a bit of an easy read article which you can have a look at. So that link takes you to the case law. And then Belinda has also put a link in there to the SEND Code of Practice, January 2015, and I'm just going to put it in there. You want to look at paragraph 9.69 in the SEND Code of Practice around specification and quantification. So I've just popped that in there as well. So they'll stay in there for you to have a look at. So you've got the link there for the case law and a link there for the Code of Practice, and it's 9.69 of the Code of Practice around specification and quantification. There is a question in there, so I'm just going to take that question quickly before we carry on with the training. So the question in there is, what if needs still deemed as relevant even though 2016? Can you ask for a reassessment of needs? So I think the question here is, if those needs in that report are still absolutely up to date and relevant, then in that case, a reassessment may not be necessary. But I would think that from 2016 to now, you know, children and young people develop and change, and their needs change, and their behaviour changes, their mental health changes, they change as people. So I would say that it's probably not still as relevant and as in date. So you can ask for a reassessment of needs. You can ask for that at the annual review, or you can ask for that as part of the case management if you're in tribunal. there is another question there that I'm just going to publish. So, if a draft was not received, but the local authority is saying it was sent on a specific date and finalised 3 months later without receiving a parental response form, is this reason to appeal? Unfortunately not, no. The local authority has to legally give you 15 days in which to send any recommendations, amendments or changes to the plan. And if they're saying they sent it to you but you didn't receive it, they may not have known that you didn't receive it within those 15 days. And so if they didn't receive a parental response form within those 15 days, they have every right to finalise the plan as is. You can then appeal the final plan if you are unhappy with the final plan because it doesn't have the changes that you want or it doesn't name the school that you want. You can appeal that final plan, but you can't appeal the fact that the local authority sent you a draft plan and then finalised it after a certain amount of time. You can't appeal that decision. You can appeal the final plan, though, if you are unhappy with it. So hopefully that answers your question. There are no new questions, so I'm going to move on to the next stage of our training, which, like I said before, is slightly shorter. So hopefully we will finish a little bit earlier than 1 o'clock as planned, but we will see how we go. So now we are getting on to sending in evidence. So your evidence is everything else after you send in. So if we go back a little bit, when you send in your SEND 35 form, it will tell you, and as we talked about, you will need to send in your final EHCP, all the reports listed in section K, the mediation certificate, and the letter that gives you the right of appeal. All the evidence that you send in after this is additional to that. You do not need to resend in your EHCP form and your KDocs. Anything else after that you send in as your evidence. So, for example, it might be witness statements, it might be further reports that you've got that haven't made it into the EHCP, could be private reports, for example, or private assessments. All of that you send in after you've sent in, that's your evidence, and that's everything you send in after what you sent with the initial SEND 35 form. When sending in evidence, make sure you index what you send. You send it in date order, so in a chronology, you send it in date order. Only send in photocopies again if you're doing it as a hard copy. If you're doing it as electronically, it doesn't matter. When the local authority responds, so if you look at the case management that you will, not case management, sorry, the case directions you will receive, which is that table of dates, the very first date on there will be when the local authority has to respond by. When they respond, you are able to then make a response to that argument. So, for example, if there is something stated in the response, such as the local authority saying the school you want can't meet a certain need, but you've seen through the school prospectus or the school have told you that they do it, you can then use that as evidence to counteract what the local authority response is and send it in as evidence. The most important thing here that you must remember, and again, I can't emphasize it enough, is that any evidence you send in, you must send to the local authority as well as the tribunal. And what will happen is when you get that local authority response will come from someone within MP law. Like I talked a little bit about before the break, it will come from someone in Norfolk Public Law. They will be your case sort of holder, your case worker, so to speak, with your tribunal case. They are who you must send all your evidence to, as well as the tribunal. And that is because the local authority then create the bundle, which we'll talk a little bit about later. They create the bundle, and so if there's any evidence that you send to the tribunal that you do not send to the local authority, it will not make its way into the bundle, and that's the bundle that the tribunal judge and the members will look at. So it's imperative, it's so important that the evidence you send in is sent to the local authority as well as the tribunal. More importantly, sent to the local authority. And that person who's managing your case from MP Law, because they are who are going to the bundle. Evidence. So your evidence needs to be up to date approximately within the last year. And I know I've already touched upon it with those questions about evidence that's over the year. We do say approximately within the last year, but the tribunal will accept up to 2 years if the information is still correct and the needs are still correct and the provision is still correct. So yeah, just bear in mind what you're sending is, and that it's evidence that is sort of within date and still relevant. It needs to address the issues that are being appealed, and it needs to support the points that you are making. You also need to check that it's relevant, and I'm going to come on in a little bit about bundle limits, how many pages you are limited to in a bundle. And so it's really important that when you send in your evidence, you aren't sending in pages and pages of not relevant evidence for a line or a paragraph that is relevant. Make sure, just send in that page. Don't send in the whole thing, because you only have a certain amount of pages in the bundle that you can use. And so it's important that you're making sure all the evidence that you're sending in is relevant, up to date, and addresses what you're asking and what you want and the arguments you're making. So these are examples of evidence, and this list is not exhaustive at all, but these are a list of the types of evidence that you can send in. So expert opinions from health, teacher reports, annual review paperwork, any private assessments or reports, exclusion letters, they're really good and really important, home to school diaries, written statements from those that are involved with the child or young person. And when I say written statements, I don't mean a written statement from nanny or granddad or aunt and uncle. I mean a written statement from someone within education that supports your child or young person and is able to back up the points you're making. The two that I've missed out there, which are so important, that are included as evidence, are your views and experiences and your child or young person's views and experiences. I always recommend including like a cover letter from you as the parent carer that explains what the impact has been on you, what the impact of your child or young person's needs are on you and the family, why the school that you want is going to make such a difference to you, to your young person, how it impacts the family as a whole, how it will impact your child or young person, how it will impact you, why it is that you want it, that kind of thing. So important. This is all included. It's also really important that the child or young person's views are gathered and put into there as evidence. And that is because the tribunal will expect for some kind of response, for some kind of information from the child or young person as to what their views are, even if it's, I don't like school. And I don't like school because it's really, really loud and noisy, and they don't let me wear my ear defenders, and they don't let me go to school early, and I can't cope with school, it's too much. That's fine. Once a person sort of hits year 9 plus, so we're looking at sort of 13, 14 plus, there is the expectation that their views will take a bigger stance in the evidence that you send in, and even more so when that person is 16 plus, because remember, at 16 plus, this is their appeal. And it has happened where the tribunal have not had any evidence or any views or experiences from the child or young person, more specifically the young person in this scenario that I'm thinking of, and they have halted proceedings and said that until they get the response from the young person who wasn't involved in this appeal and should have been, they would not continue with the hearing. And so sent everyone away, sent the parent away to get the views from the young person to come back to the hearing. So it's important to bear that in mind. Late evidence. If either the local authority or parent carer seeks to submit late evidence after the final evidence deadline, A copy of the evidence must be sent to the other party and to the tribunal. So that's really, really important. You can submit late evidence right up to the hearing, but you must send that late evidence to both parties. The evidence will then be considered at the final hearing, and the tribunal do not have to accept late evidence. Something else to bear in mind, which again has happened to me as part of a tribunal, is where there was a significant amount of late evidence submitted, not just one report, but multiple reports. And the tribunal felt that it wasn't conducive to carry on with the appeal, the hearing on that date, because both the local authority and the tribunal needed to go away and look at the late evidence that had been submitted by the parent carer, take some time to digest it, read it through thoroughly, which they weren't able to do in the hearing. And so they postponed the hearing from that day and relisted it for 2 weeks later. So another thing to bear in mind, that if you do submit really late evidence and there is a significant amount of it, you may end up actually halting your tribunal and relisting it for a later date, which will make the whole process even longer. So the bundle, which we've talked about very, very briefly, and this is what we're going to talk about in relation to the pages. What will happen is the local authority will collect, index and issue all the evidence of both parties electronically. I would advise that you ask the local authority to send you a copy of the bundle as a hard copy. So they will send you it electronically, but I would advise that you ask for a hard copy. When you get that bundle, check the bundle to make sure all the evidence that you submitted is included. That's really, really important, because again, in a tribunal that I've supported in the past, we've gone through the bundle and found that huge swathes of information was missing that we had submitted. So it's important you make sure you go through the bundle and make sure that all the evidence you submitted to the local authority is there. You, the parent carer or the young person, must then provide copies of the bundle to any witnesses that you're asking to attend, and we will talk about witnesses a little bit later. That's important because the local authority will not send the bundle to anyone other than you. With the bundle, when I've been sent bundles in the past and I've supported with tribunals, I have gone through them with 2 different coloured highlighters. I've gone through them with post-it notes. I've scribbled all over them, and I would recommend that you do the same. It is your bundle. It is something you must know what is in there. You must be aware of what the page numbers are, because it's going to be referred to a lot during the hearing. You must know where things are, and it's important that if there is anything you want to specifically bring to the attention of the tribunal, you are able to highlight it, stick a post-it note there, and know that you can go to that and bring it to their attention. So with your bundle, which is yours, write all over it, scribble on it, highlight it, post-it note it, do whatever you need to help you with it. So we talked there about page limit. So I spoke about that a little bit earlier on. And so it's important that you keep to the page limit. So there is a page limit the tribunal will accept on bundles. These are sections B, F and I, 175 pages each per party. Section B and or F, 100 pages each per party. Section I, 75 pages per party. And health and social care recommendations, 50 pages each party. It's really important you stick to this. The tribunal have become even stricter than ever on bundle guidance, and are really, really strict, and we'll go back to you and say you need to pick which pages are important, because we're not looking at all of this. If you do want to submit more evidence than the page limits allow, you must make a request for changes form, which is a Send 7 form, explaining why the additional pages are necessary. And if the other party were to raise an objection to the number of pages submitted after the bundle is produced, then this issue will be considered by the tribunal at the hearing. Again, something to bear in mind, but I would say at the moment, the tribunal are incredibly hot on these bundle pages, and so it's important you stick to them wherever possible. I'm just going to stop and see if we've got any questions. Ooh. So I have received the first EHCP draft and had a draft meeting and I had a few questions. The ed psych has said he needs a one-to-one, however, the coordinator is the opinion that it would be too much and a general TA will be enough. There was no mention of how much funding he is getting, and she said this is the only added once the school is chosen. Is this correct? So funding won't be added to the EHCP. You will not see funding at any point in the EHCP listed or named. Funding should not be in the EHCP. Funding is decided between the local authority and the school. Once the school is named, once the EHCP is there, funding is nothing to do with parent carers. It should not be in the EHCP whatsoever. Funding is just between the local authority and the school. If the ed psych is saying he needs a one-to-one, that is a professional opinion. The EHCP coordinator cannot give their opinion. They have not assessed your child. They do not have the qualifications that an ed psych does. They cannot put their opinions into the plan. It is the opinion of the ed psych, and it's as simple as that. If the ed psych has written that into a report, that must make its way into the plan, whether the coordinator agrees with it or not. What to do if the child isn't verbal? Oh, and I was breaking up, sorry about that. So if the child isn't verbal, you are still able to gather their views if you are able to show them a smiley or happy face and ask them a question and say, can you point, do you like school? Yes or no, smiley face or unhappy face. There are some, if you go online, there are some fantastic resources online to gather children and young people's views, whether they are verbal or non-verbal. So, you know, there is lots of resources online to get that. What do we send subject access requests to re-panels? Oh, sorry, who do we send? Sorry, that was my fault. Who do we send subject access requests to re-panels? That would be the local authority. You would send it to the local authority. They should have on their web page who you would send it to, but you would send it to them. Oh, I've got another question that's come through, which is the same as the one I answered before, sorry, which is if a draft was not received, but the LA are saying it was sent on a specific date and finalised, is this reason to appeal? So I've already answered that. As I said before, the local authority can finalise a draft EHCP with or without parental response form, with or without parental permission, and you cannot appeal that, but you can appeal the final plan if you are unhappy with it. So that is all the questions there. Let's carry on. I think we are coming quite close to the end now, which is great. I'll be able to give you some time back. Okay. So we've done the bundle. So we've got on to witnesses. So the tribunal limit the number of witnesses to 3. A witness needs to be able to help prove a point that you are relying on, and that's really, really important. If you are asking a witness to attend, I would really recommend that prior to the hearing, you have a meeting with your witness, you sit down with them virtually or physically, and you talk to them about what it is that you are wanting them to talk about. Make sure that there is nothing they might say that might end up supporting the local authority's argument. If you want someone to attend as witness, but they aren't able to, they can write a witness statement, and that is sufficient. If you've got someone that you would like to attend as a witness to the tribunal, and they're saying no for whatever reason, and they might also be saying no to writing a witness statement, you can ask them to be summoned by the tribunal, and you would request this summons through a Send 7 request for changes form. The summons is sent to the parent or young person, and you must then serve it to the witness. So you have to hand deliver the summons to your witness and tell them that they must attend the hearing on whatever date. It's not something that happens a lot, but it is there in case the witness, for whatever reason. So, for example, if their employer is saying it's a conflict of interest, we can't have them attend with the tribunal, but the witness wants to, but their employer is saying no, you can request the summons and then they have to attend. Things to think about in regards to witnesses is having witnesses that are going to support your point, such as if you and the SENCO of the school that your child or young person is currently at, or the school or college of the that has been named for the young person for their phase transfer, if both are saying that they believe the school named is not going to be suitable, they can attend as witnesses. You can also ask TAs to attend as witnesses, because, you know, if you've got a one-to-one TA that knows your child really, really well, they might be able to attend. Speech and language therapist, occupational therapist, they can attend as witnesses. So it's important, you only have 3. It's important that you have witnesses that are going to support you and make your point and make your argument. One thing to remember is if you are appealing for a wholly independent school, and we talked about that right back at the beginning, schools like St Andrews, Aurora Eccles, Lessingham All Saints, you will need to ask for a representative from that school to attend as a witness if you are appealing for them, and if the school has said yes. You can only appeal for a wholly independent school if that school has said yes, they can meet needs, and yes, they have a space. It's the local authority that have chosen not to name it because of the public purse. You must have a representative from that school in attendance, because the tribunal are likely to want to ask them quite a few questions. So it's important that you have someone from that school attending. Also to bear in mind is, and this has just jumped into my head because this happened again with me at a tribunal with a case supported. If you are requesting a school that is Ofsted as inadequate, or requires improvement, tribunal do not like to name those schools. And if that's a school that you are wanting, again, you will need to send a witness from that school to your tribunal, because they will need to answer questions to appease the tribunal, put their minds at rest as to why it is that you want a school that may be rated Ofsted inadequate or requires improvement. And this is the same for the local authority. If they are naming a school that again is inadequate or requires improvement, it's important that you bring this to the attention of the tribunal service. Also, as part of the evidence, which has just made me think, but as part of your evidence, it's also really important that you send the Ofsted report of the school that you want and the prospectus that you want, because the tribunal, the judge and the member will not be from Norfolk. They will not know the landscape of Norfolk or the schools in Norfolk. So it's important that you send them that so they have an understanding of what it is you're asking for. The working document. So if you are, this is a Word version of the EHCP you are appealing. So if you are appealing Section I only, you will not receive a working document. If you are appealing B and F, and as we talked about right back at the beginning, if you only made partial agreement at a mediation, or you chose not to go to mediation meeting and go straight to appeal, then you will receive a working document. And this is a Word version of the plan. You will be submitted that, and once all the evidence, you will be provided that, once all the evidence has been submitted. And you will use this document, this working document, to make the changes that you want to B&S, and it will go back and forth between you and the local authority as many times as it needs to before the hearing, because the tribunal will expect that you will make as many changes to the working document as possible. You will try to resolve it prior to the hearing, and if you can't resolve it, only the really contentious, difficult bits that you cannot get agreement on are taken to the hearing for them to rule on. But it's really important that you go back and forth, back and forth, back and forth with the local authority, and it can happen as many times as it needs to for you to get any agreements. The tribunal will then ask for the latest version of the working document before the hearing, and that date should be in the case directions or as part of case management, and that's when you would submit it. Like I say, it's important that you try and resolve as many amendments, with the local authority prior to it going to hearing, because that is what the tribunal will expect. This is just a look at the key. So this is what a working document key looks like. So when you get sent a working document, it will have this key at the top, and it will show that you as the parent must put bold type for anything you propose, for any proposed amendments, and bold strike through for any proposed deletions, and the same for the local authority, so that when you come to look through it, you can see where decisions have been made, where agreements have been made, where deletions from the local authority have been made, etc. So we are coming very close to the end now, so I will power through and then we'll have a look and see if there are any questions. So what is a virtual or face-to-face hearing like? So due to COVID, all hearings are currently online. And this is happening till at least September, I think. And then from September, they're going to look at bringing in a hybrid of some face-to-face, some virtual. Virtual hearings for the tribunal have actually ended up being a real fantastic thing, not just for the tribunal, but for the judges and the members, because what was happening pre-COVID is that they weren't able to find judges and members that were able to travel across the country. They didn't have enough judges and members to be one day in Norfolk, one day in Birmingham, one day in Cornwall, one day in Newcastle. They were really struggling, and so lots and lots of hearings were being postponed. They just didn't have enough staff and enough resources. So with it going virtual, that changed because it's all done from home. So the hearing will be as relaxed and as formal as possible, and the tribunal will be really supportive to the parent carers and the young person that are there. It will be virtual up until September, like I said. So the majority of you here today will have your hearing right up till, will have your hearing probably before September. You will be sent joining instructions around 3 or 4 days before the hearing. These are really important. You must follow them, but you must also send these joining instructions to any witnesses that you have, because they will not receive the joining instructions. You must send it to them. You may feel emotional, and that's completely normal. You are talking about your child, your young person, their life, their future, and you are able to ask for a break if you feel you need one. Just ask the judge. They are really accommodating. Depending on the type of case, the panel will be made up of a judge and 1 or 2 specialist members. And if you are appealing national trial, health and social care, single route of redress, then there may be a health member or a social care member. I always recommend that you take a photo of your child or young person to the hearing and you introduce them. It helps everyone in the room to remember that this is about a person, this is about your child. This isn't just a bundle of information, and this isn't just a load of reports and assessments and clinical words and difficult information to comprehend and read. This is about a child, this is about a young person, and this is their life, this is their educational career, this is their future, and it brings that human aspect back to the hearing. Phones cannot be used in the hearing unless obviously you're using your phone to be part of the hearing. So if you're using your phone to be on there virtually, that's different, but you can't have your phone on and take a call in the middle of the hearing or text during the hearing. Keep calm and don't talk over people. That's really, really important. I have been in a hearing with parents where one of the parents did keep talking over the local authority, and the judge asked them multiple times to stop, and in the end the judge did say if they did it again they would ask them to be removed from the hearing. So it's important you don't talk over people. If you are not represented, and like I said, you do not need to be represented, the judge should make sure you are able to contribute as much as the local authority. The hearing, the local authority, the tribunal, sorry, the judge and the members are really sympathetic, they're really empathetic, they're really helpful, and they will support you as much as they can. If you have a representative, they can't do that, they can't support you. So that's why the judges, and Judge Jane McConnell, who I've met and spoken to before, makes it very clear, she's the head of the SENDIST, makes it very clear that tribunals actually prefer it when parents come without representation. And last but not least, take a summary of the main points you want to ensure the tribunal has heard for summing up. So at the very, very end of the hearing, you and the local authority will have the ability to sum up your case in a couple of words, a couple of points, in a paragraph, sort of like a statement. Take that with you before you go to the hearing. It's better to have it written down because it's easy to forget in that environment. So that's important. Children attending the hearing. So children and young person views will be needed and will have been taken before the hearing and submitted as evidence. If it's a young person, 16 to 25, they will be expected to attend the whole hearing because the appeal is in their name, unless we're looking at mental capacity. If you are wanting a child to attend, sort of 16 and under, to give their views across, that's absolutely fine, but it's really being aware that the child or young person will be there for a very small amount of time, so 15, 20 minutes, to give their point across, and normally they will give that point to the tribunal members, to the judge, without anyone else present. But they will then not be able to stay in the hearing, and there will need to be childcare for them. So you need to be aware that there will need to be somebody else at home who can then look after your child for the rest of the hearing, because they can only be in it for a small portion of time. Or consent. So the local authority can only concede an appeal before their response date. So remember, if we go back to the table of dates, the case directions, the very first date on there is their response, what their response is to the appeal. If prior to that date, the local authority offer you the placement you wanted, the local authority conceding. They're saying, okay, we concede, we're going to give them what they want. That's when the hearing will then end, the process will end. If after this date, after that response date, the appeal can only be concluded in one of two ways. Either the decision by the tribunal at the hearing or 2 weeks after the hearing, or if a parent or young person withdraws the appeal with the tribunal's consent. And that's sometimes if between the response date and the hearing, the local authority may offer you the placement that you want or the changes you want to B&S. If that's the case, make sure that you get it in writing. Do not withdraw at all without it being in writing that you are being offered the placement you want, and if possible amended in the plan, again with B or S if you're making changes to them or the placement. If you do fill in a send date form, which is a withdrawal from the tribunal service, the tribunal may contact you just to make sure that you know why you're withdrawing and that there is no pressure from the local authority to withdraw and that they are happy with you withdrawing. If the appeal is withdrawn after the response date by you, the parent, carer, or the young person, then the local authority will not be held to the time limits of completing the agreed actions, so naming the school placement or making the changes to B&S. So what we advise is that parents or carers or young people ask for a consent order from the tribunal rather than withdraw. And this gives you an added layer of safety because the tribunal will order the local authority to name the placement they have offered by a certain time or make the changes to B&S by a certain time. So we always advise that you do a consent order rather than just withdraw of your own accord because it adds that extra layer of safety. Something else to be aware of at this point is that there is something called the 5-day rule that is being enforced by the tribunal. And that is where if you are offered the school you want or the changes you want to B&S in the 5 days leading up to the hearing, and you accept it, you must still attend the hearing. The tribunal will not accept you withdrawing or the consent order because it shouldn't happen within those 5 days leading up to the hearing. So that you will still be expected, and the tribunal and the local authority, will be expected to attend the tribunal if it is offered within those 5 days. Again, something to bear in mind that even if you are offered it and your hearing is in 2 days, you will still be expected to attend. We come to the end now. So Belinda, if you can pop the evaluation form into the chat for Q&A function for me, sorry. If you want to fill in the evaluation form for us, and if you want to get the PowerPoint presentation in the evaluation form, if you fill in your email address, we'll then send it to you next week. This is just a bit useful information. So there's our information there, the information for the First Tier Tribunal, IPSI and Contact, which are 2 other services that can help. And there's also mediation information there as well. So if you can pop that evaluation form in there, we would really appreciate it if you could fill it in. And if you wanted the presentation slides, pop your email address into the box at the end of the evaluation form, and we will send you those slides next week.